In 2024, one lunar mission captivated the world.
China's grand lunar ambitions, worth $66 trillion, have definitely caught the world's attention. However, not everyone's looking forward.
China launched its Chang'e 6 mission, the first in the world to bring back lunar samples from the moon's hidden face, the far side.
Sure, China has completed difficult moon explorations, which was a leap forward for science. But US experts are starting to sound the alarm. They believe that China's growing presence is for many reasons, not just simple space exploration. America's concern? China's domination can have dire consequences on Earth, even beyond. So what exactly are people worried about? Let's break it down. The shooting for the moon, literally. Over the past decade, China has made it clear that it's not just watching the space race from the sidelines, it's actively shaping the future of space exploration. The China National Space Administration, CNSA, China's version of NASA, has been making big moves, especially when it comes to the moon. While the United States and a few other countries have long histories of space exploration, China has been catching up quickly, and in some areas, it's even starting to lead. One of China's most impressive achievements was landing the Chang'e 4 rover on the far side of the moon in 2019. That was a historic first. No other country had ever done it. The far side of the moon is difficult to reach and even harder to communicate with, but China pulled it off using a relay satellite called Keqiao to keep in contact with the rover. It was a smart and well-executed move that showed China wasn't just repeating past missions, but was ready to push into new territory. Then came the Chang'e 5 mission in 2020, which successfully collected and returned lunar samples to Earth. This was another big deal. The last time anyone brought moon rocks back was in the 70s during the Cold War-era space race. China's success here signaled that it had not only the ambition, but also the capability to handle complex, multi-phase missions. These aren't small projects. Each one takes years of planning, billions of dollars, and a whole lot of scientific muscle. But China's lunar plans go far beyond collecting rocks and sending rovers. There's serious talk about establishing a lunar base. The idea is to set up a long-term research station on the moon, possibly with international partners like Russia. The station could support both robotic and human missions and might even serve as a stepping stone for future missions to Mars. And let's not forget the resources. The moon isn't just a dusty rock. There's water ice in its shadowy craters, which could be used for drinking water, breathable air, and even rocket fuel. Some believe the moon also holds valuable minerals that are rare on Earth. Of course, this kind of long-term lunar presence comes with an astronomical price tag, potentially in the trillions of dollars. Some reports says $66 trillion. When you factor in the infrastructure needed to support human life, the advanced technology required for mining and manufacturing in space, and the massive amount of research needed to make all of this sustainable. But China seems willing to play the long game. Their approach is strategic and methodical, combining ambitious goals with a clear plan for how to reach them over time. What's especially interesting is how this fits into the broader picture of international space exploration. China is building its own space station, the Tiangong, and has deliberately developed its space program in a way that's largely independent from the West. With growing geopolitical tensions, space is becoming not just a field of scientific inquiry, but a domain of competition. Whoever controls the moon, or at least has the strongest presence there, could end up with major strategic advantages in the future. China's lunar ambitions reflect more than just a desire to explore. They're about national pride, technological leadership, and securing a role as one of the major players in the next chapter of human space exploration. Whether it's building a lunar base, mining for resources, or laying the groundwork for a future Mars mission, China is clearly in this for the long haul. And as the rest of the world watches, or joins in, we're all likely to witness a new era of space exploration with the moon at the center of it all. But not America. Experts have raised their caution once China pursues lunar dominance and ownership. What could go wrong? Warning: no dibs on the moon. First up is the fear that China could try to dominate key parts of the moon. While no country can officially own the moon, thanks to international treaties like the 1967 Outer Space Treaty, there's still plenty of room for interpretation. Experts worry that if China establishes a base near the moon's most valuable resources, like the water ice in permanently shadowed craters at the lunar South Pole, they could end up claiming de facto control over them. This would make it difficult for other countries to access these same spots. Think of it like claiming the best land during a gold rush. First come, first served. And then there's the military advantages that are sought by almost all nations. While much of the public attention on lunar exploration focuses on scientific discovery and resource utilization, there is a growing undercurrent of military concern tied to space activities, especially involving major powers like China and the United States. As China accelerates its lunar missions and plans for a long-term presence on the moon, analysts and defense strategists are increasingly examining the military implications of such moves. Although a moon base sounds like a purely peaceful scientific outpost today, its potential future applications in surveillance, communications, intelligence gathering, and even space-based weaponry are raising alarms about a possible militarization of the moon. One of the core reasons this issue is taken seriously is because space technology is inherently dual use, meaning it can serve both civilian and military purposes. For example, a satellite used for weather monitoring can also be used to track missile launches or troop movements. Similarly, a lunar base designed for scientific experiments or resource extraction could also support military objectives, such as hosting reconnaissance equipment or advanced communications systems. In the case of China, many of its space programs operate under or in close coordination with the People's Liberation Army, PLA. This military oversight increases Western concerns that ostensibly peaceful missions to the moon could lay the groundwork for future military infrastructure. Even if China publicly maintains its missions are scientific, the technical infrastructure being developed, launch systems, satellite constellations, space vehicles, and lunar habitats, could easily be repurposed for strategic defense or offense. One of the clearest military advantages of a lunar base would be in the area of space-based surveillance. A base on the moon, especially in a stable orbit or at strategic points such as lunar Lagrange points, could be equipped with powerful optical or radio telescopes capable of monitoring activity in Earth orbit and potentially on Earth's surface. This would give the country operating such a facility a significant edge in real-time intelligence gathering, similar to the advantage GPS and surveillance satellites provide today. In addition to surveillance, there's also the potential for communication dominance. Spacefaring nations rely heavily on satellites for secure communication. A lunar relay station could be used to extend or shield military communications networks, giving its operators more resilient or faster communications, especially in times of global conflict or cyber warfare. Controlling communication nodes from the moon, or having a backup system there, could be a major strategic advantage in any future conflict. Though the idea of placing weapons on the moon may sound like science fiction today, it's not beyond the realm of possibility in the decades ahead. While current treaties, such as the Outer Space Treaty, prohibit the placement of weapons of mass destruction in space, they do not explicitly ban the deployment of conventional weapons or infrastructure that could one day support weapons systems. A lunar base, for example, could serve as a launch platform for kinetic weapons, such as so-called rods from God orbital bombardment systems, or host defensive systems capable of targeting satellites or intercontinental ballistic missiles, ICBMs, in mid-flight. Even if China doesn't plan to weaponize the moon directly, simply having a dominant presence there could create strategic leverage. It could allow them to deter other nations from taking military actions in space or disrupt critical satellite infrastructure that modern militaries depend on for navigation, targeting, communication, and intelligence. From a defense perspective, The United States is deeply concerned that if China establishes a strong lead in lunar operations, especially before the US and its allies can match or counterbalance it, it could create a strategic imbalance in space. Just as control over the seas and skies has shaped past geopolitical conflicts, dominance over space, particularly high ground like the Moon, could become a decisive factor in future power dynamics. This is why US initiatives such as the Space Force, the Artemis program, and the Artemis Accords emphasize not only scientific exploration, but also maintaining strategic parity in space. The fear is that if China controls critical lunar infrastructure, especially in areas like the lunar South Pole, it could dictate the terms of access to lunar resources or dominate key orbits and communication routes. This could erode the space-based advantages the US military has long enjoyed and relied upon. The possibility of lunar military outposts, surveillance capabilities, or communications dominance raises the specter of a new arms race in space. Unlike the Cold War's nuclear arms race, this would involve space-based assets, high-speed interceptors, satellite-blinding weapons, and autonomous systems designed for space warfare. The lack of modern, enforceable treaties governing space militarization increases the risk of miscalculations, accidental escalation, and weapon deployments disguised as scientific missions. To prevent this, experts argue for a stronger international legal framework that clearly defines what is and isn't allowed on celestial bodies, including mechanisms for transparency and verification. Without such agreements, the Moon could become a battleground for geopolitical rivalry, rather than a platform for shared exploration. While the Moon remains a symbol of scientific progress and human curiosity, its growing strategic importance cannot be ignored. The potential for military advantages stemming from lunar infrastructure, whether for surveillance, communications, or future weapons systems, is prompting deep concern among analysts and defense officials. As China continues to expand its presence on the Moon, the possibility of space being used for strategic military dominance becomes increasingly real. For global stability, it's crucial that space powers work toward transparent, cooperative agreements that ensure the Moon remains a zone of peaceful exploration, not a new front in geopolitical conflict. The list of cautions does not end there. There are more implications that might benefit China, but not the rest of the world. Technological dominance and space leadership. The Moon is just one piece of a much larger puzzle: global leadership in space technology. If China keeps racking up achievements while other countries fall behind, it could become the go-to partner for space missions and innovation. That would mean more influence on international rules, standards, and agreements about how space is used. Basically, whoever leads in space gets a bigger say in shaping the future. US experts fear that if China sets the rules, they may not align with democratic values or open access policies that have historically guided space cooperation. Another possible consequence is the creation of a space club, where only a few select countries get to participate. China has already been building its own space station and inviting chosen allies to join in. If they do the same with the Moon, forming exclusive partnerships while keeping rivals out, it could deepen global divisions. US officials have expressed concern that China's strategy isn't just about exploration, but also about gaining diplomatic leverage by offering space cooperation to countries in return for political support. Let's not forget that the Moon might actually be valuable, not just symbolically, but economically. There's growing interest in lunar mining, especially for water ice, which can be turned into rocket fuel, and rare minerals used in electronics. If China gets a head start and starts extracting resources, others might rush to catch up. That opens the door to competition and even conflict. Without clear international rules on how lunar resources should be shared, things could get tense fast. Lastly, experts worry that China might not always play by the rules, or at least they might interpret them in a way that benefits their own agenda. This isn't necessarily about breaking laws, but about pushing boundaries. For example, if China sets up a safety zone around a lunar base and warns others to stay out, it could challenge existing space law, which says space is free for all. If others follow suit, the moon could end up divided into zones of influence, which would be a huge shift from the spirit of peaceful exploration. While China's lunar ambitions are technically impressive and potentially beneficial for humanity, they also come with big geopolitical risks. US experts aren't just worried about science. They're looking at the bigger picture: power, influence, and the future of space governance. Whether those fears come true depends a lot on how the international community responds. Will countries compete or cooperate? Will we set clear rules, or let the moon turn into the next frontier of global rivalry? Only time will tell, but the stakes are sky high, especially when we start reviewing all of China's lunar achievements. In fact, people's responses are majorly positive on their side. China had a track record of meeting their projected timeline, often ahead instead of delayed. Lunar milestones. China's journey to the moon has been fascinating to watch, especially because it didn't begin with a space race mentality. Instead of competing with others for headlines, China quietly built up its space program step by step, with a long-term vision in mind. While the United States and the Soviet Union went head-to-head during the Cold War, China took a more patient route, waiting until its technology, funding, and talent were all in place. Once ready, it entered the lunar stage with precision and purpose. The first real milestone came in 2007 with the launch of Chang'e-1, named after the legendary Chinese moon goddess. It was China's first lunar orbiter, and although it didn't land on the moon, it achieved several crucial goals. Chang'e-1 mapped the entire lunar surface, giving Chinese scientists high-resolution data to work with and proving that their spacecraft could operate in deep space. It also tested essential technologies like long-range communication, orbit control, and thermal regulation in the harsh environment of lunar orbit. This mission set the tone. No rush, just careful progress. Building on that success, China launched Chang'e-2 in 2010. This orbiter took sharper images and performed more detailed mapping, including identifying potential landing sites for future missions. Impressively, after completing its main mission around the moon, it went on to visit an asteroid, 4179 Tutatis, demonstrating China's growing capability to operate spacecraft far from Earth with accuracy. It was like saying, "We've got this." Then came a major leap. Chang'e-3 launched in 2013. This mission marked China's first soft landing on the moon and its first deployment of a lunar rover, U2, or Jade Rabbit. Soft landings are no small feat. They require extremely precise control to touch down without crashing, especially in a place with no atmosphere to slow you down. Chang'e-3 pulled it off, landing safely in the Mare Imbrium region. The rover itself experienced some mobility problems after a few weeks, but it still managed to collect valuable data and send back incredible images. For China, this was a defining moment. It had become the third country in the world to land a spacecraft on the moon. But China wasn't done impressing. In 2019, it did something no country had ever done before, landing on the far side of the moon. This was the Chang'e-4 mission, and it was a real game-changer. The moon's far side is perpetually hidden from Earth, which means you can't communicate with a spacecraft there using standard methods. To solve this, China launched a dedicated relay satellite, Queqiao, to a special orbit beyond the moon, where it could maintain line of sight with both Earth and the lander. The Chang'e-4 mission was a huge technical success and carried a second rover, U2-2, which explored the South Pole Aitken Basin, one of the oldest and deepest craters in the solar system. The mission helped scientists learn more about the moon's structure and history while again showing off China's engineering capabilities. The next milestone was perhaps the most complex of all. In December 2020, China launched Chang'e-5, a robotic mission with the goal of bringing moon rocks back to Earth, something that hadn't been done since 1976. when the Soviet Union's Lunar 24 mission returned a small sample. Chang'e 5 was incredibly ambitious. It had multiple components: a lander to collect samples, an ascent vehicle to launch them back into lunar orbit, a service module to rendezvous and dock with the ascent vehicle, and a re-entry capsule to bring the samples back to Earth. The mission went flawlessly. China retrieved 1.7 kilograms of lunar soil, and for the first time, its scientists had moon samples they could study firsthand. The data has provided insights into lunar volcanism and even helped refine the estimated age of the moon's surface. What's even more impressive is that each mission built directly on the one before it, both technically and scientifically. Rather than rushing toward a crude mission, China has been refining its knowledge and improving its systems with each step. This methodical approach is one reason why global space experts take China's lunar program so seriously. Looking into the near future, China's lunar plans are only getting more ambitious. Missions like Chang'e 6, 7, and 8 are already in the works. Chang'e 6 is planned to return samples from the far side of the moon, another first if successful. Chang'e 7 and 8 aim to explore the moon's south polar region, which is of great interest because of the possibility of water ice hidden in permanently shadowed craters. Water is a game changer for future human exploration, as it can be used for drinking, creating breathable air, and even making rocket fuel. Long-term, China has even bigger plans. It has proposed building an international lunar research station, possibly in collaboration with Russia, to be established sometime in the 2030s. This would be a scientific outpost near the moon's south pole, meant to support long-term robotic and eventually crewed missions. China is also developing powerful new rockets like the Long March 9 and is working on a next-generation crewed spacecraft that could take astronauts to the moon. If all goes according to plan, China could send its first astronauts to the lunar surface in the early 2030s. This would mark a new era in human space exploration, and it would put China in a leading position. What makes China's lunar journey so noteworthy is not just its string of technical successes, but the clear vision behind them. The moon is not the final goal, it's the gateway. China sees the moon as a place to learn, to test, and to prepare for even more distant missions, possibly to Mars. China's lunar milestones tell a story of careful planning, bold engineering, and growing confidence. It's not about winning a race, it's about building a presence that lasts. How will the US and other nations keep up? Will they let China take the lead? Or in secret, the US wants to take over the moon? The moon and America. The moon has always held a special place in American history. Ever since Neil Armstrong took that first step in 1969 and declared it a giant leap for mankind, the moon has symbolized the height of US achievement and ambition. The Apollo missions weren't just about science. They were about proving something during the Cold War, that the US could lead the world in space. Today, decades later, that same spirit of competition and leadership is making a comeback. With countries like China and Russia making big moves in space, the United States is once again turning its attention to the moon, this time with the goal of long-term dominance, not just quick visits. A big part of this renewed interest is NASA's Artemis program, which aims to send astronauts back to the moon, this time to stay. Unlike the Apollo missions, which were short-term landings, Artemis has bigger goals. It plans to establish a sustainable presence on and around the moon, including a base camp on the surface and a space station called Gateway in lunar orbit. The idea is to create a launching point for deeper space exploration, including human missions to Mars. But beyond that, Artemis represents a kind of modern space race, and the US is determined to come out on top again. By leading the way, America can shape the rules and standards for lunar activity, which is becoming more important as other nations and private companies join the game. Another major factor in the US's push for lunar dominance is the moon's resources. Scientists believe the moon holds deposits of water ice, especially near its poles. This might not sound like a big deal, but water is incredibly valuable in space. It can be turned into drinking water, breathable oxygen, and even rocket fuel through a process called electrolysis. If the US can tap into these resources, it could give American missions a huge advantage, not just for staying on the moon, but for launching to Mars and beyond. Mining the moon might sound like science fiction, but it's quickly becoming a real possibility. Controlling those resources could mean big power and economic benefits in the future. Of course, it's not just about exploration and resources, there's also a strategic and military angle. Space has been called the ultimate high ground, and that includes the moon. The far side of the moon, which always faces away from Earth, could be a prime spot for military communication or surveillance technology. The US is very aware of this, especially with rivals like China pushing their own lunar agendas. That's part of why the US Space Force was created in 2019, to make sure America doesn't fall behind in space defense. By establishing an early and strong presence on the moon, the US can make sure it's not caught off guard by other nations' moves, and can help protect its own satellites and infrastructure. Lastly, there's something bigger than politics or resources driving America's lunar ambitions, national pride, and the desire to lead. The moon is still a symbol of possibility and progress. Getting back there with astronauts, especially more diverse crews than ever before, sends a powerful message about American innovation and leadership. It also has the potential to inspire a new generation of scientists, engineers, and dreamers. Just like the Apollo era inspired kids to go into STEM fields and pushed the boundaries of what seemed possible, the Artemis era could reignite that same excitement. In a world full of complex problems, returning to the moon gives people something to rally around. Why no nation should own the moon? Let's face it, some things are just too special to be owned. The moon, with all its mystery, beauty, and history, is one of those things. For centuries, people from every culture and corner of the world have looked up at the moon with wonder. It has inspired stories, guided travelers, and sparked scientific curiosity. The moon isn't just a rock floating in space. It's a symbol of connection and shared human experience. So the idea that someone, whether it's a country, a company, or a billionaire, could one day put a flag on it and say, "This is mine," doesn't sit right. It feels like trying to buy the stars or trademark the sky. Some things should stay untouched, and the moon is definitely one of them. For starters, the moon isn't the kind of place you can just claim like property. It's not a backyard that someone can fence off or a plot of land to be bought and sold. It exists in outer space, beyond the borders of any country or government. Just because someone has the money or technology to get there doesn't give them the moral right to own it. Imagine if the first person to discover the ocean had claimed all the water for themselves. Ridiculous, right? That's the same kind of logic used when someone suggests owning the moon. It turns something universal and shared into something selfish and limited. There's also a huge fairness issue. Right now, only a few nations and wealthy private companies have the resources to send missions into space. If we allowed people to start claiming parts of the moon, it would turn space exploration into a race for power and profit. It would only benefit the few who already have the most, while leaving the rest of the world out. And let's be real, we already have enough inequality on Earth. Do we really want to extend that problem into space? The moon should be a place for science, discovery, and international cooperation, not business deals and ownership fights. What's more, there's already an agreement that says no one can own the moon. It's called the Outer Space Treaty, and it was signed way back in 1967 by major spacefaring nations like the United States, Russia, and many others. The treaty basically says that outer space, including the moon, is the province of all mankind. In other words, it belongs to everyone and no one. Countries can explore it, study it, even land on it, but they can't claim it as their own. It's a smart and fair agreement that prevents space from becoming a battlefield for territory and resources. Ignoring that treaty or trying to find loopholes could lead to conflict, not just between countries but also between corporations and governments. And let's not forget the bigger picture. The moon reminds us that we're part of something much larger than ourselves. It's a quiet witness to Earth's history, watching over us through war and peace, progress and failure. When humans first walked on the moon, it wasn't just a moment for one nation. It was a triumph for all humanity. That's the spirit we need to protect. If we start carving up the moon for private use, we lose that sense of unity. It becomes just another resource to be used rather than a symbol to be cherished. The moon should remain what it has always been, a place of wonder, inspiration, and shared human heritage. It doesn't need to be owned to be explored. It doesn't need to be sold to be valued. We can study it, visit it, even live on it someday. But we should never put a price tag on it. Because when something belongs to all of us, it should stay that way. Let the moon be free. Not because we can't own it, but because we shouldn't. Is it possible to conquer and own the moon by a country? Share us what you think in the comments section. Subscribe to the channel for more.